Well, hello there. I didn't see you come in. Make yourself at home. Have a drink. While I give some attention to some underappreciated characters and storylines that I personally love. And I hope you grow to love as well.
Hey there, everybody, and welcome back. Today we're reading Swamp Thing number 158. And just a little catch up before we get into that. In the last issue, we saw the main story arc called River Run Wrap Up. And what that consisted of is a girl named Anna killed herself. And it turned out that she was a writer. And because her stories were unfinished, she was somehow cursed into living inside of each storyline until either she or someone else could write better endings to the stories. And luckily for her, eventually Swamp Thing just happened to come upon her in the swamp, and he agreed to help her do this task. So he has gone through each one of her stories and fixed the ending, and this gave each of the last 6 issues very unique story settings, but all very dark, sometimes dealing with actual comic book things, like even Alec Holland's origin story. But sometimes they were just what if stories, like what if the Nazis won World War II? Or what if zombies were real and they lived in New Orleans, but they were just kind of normal people in society. So after going through each of these stories and fixing them, we got the last story, which was actually the story of Anna herself and how she'd come to commit suicide. And at the end of that, while Anna was talking to Swamp Thing, all of a sudden her body began to turn into water until all of her just splashed down onto the street and down into a drain. And that left Swamp Thing just kind of standing there, not knowing what was going on. And that was where we left off. So first things first, with issue 158, we got the cover. We see Swamp Thing is walking down some steps that are under the water in the ocean. We see a bunch of coral and sea life surrounding these steps as Swamp Thing just casually walks down them. And we see this issue is written by Mark Miller with art by Phil Hester and Kim DeMulder. The first page of this issue is kind of weird because it starts off on a Navy vessel, and the captain is yelling at the cook, and they're going back and forth, and it's kind of funny. But then we see a hand come out and pick the boat out of the water. And then as we turn to the second page, we see a boy with this toy ship in his hands, and he's playing with it in the river. So obviously these people on the ship weren't real, but it made it seem like it because, like I said, there was actually characters talking on it. And also we can see smoke coming from the smokestack on it. So I'm not sure what this is trying to say, but it doesn't seem to really matter. It just seems like maybe it was an interesting way to start this comic, because it never comes up again in this issue. Because as the boy picks the ship up, we see that the building next to the body of water he's standing in is the morgue. And specifically, it's the morgue that Anna's body is being held in. And we see 2 men wheeling her body down a hallway as they're about to do an autopsy. And these 2 men look kind of familiar. They look a lot and sound a lot like 2 of the men that were hired to kill Alec Holland a couple issues back in the River Run chapter that was set in our world, but it was what if the story of Alec Holland had happened in our reality and not the comic books? So as they push the table down the hallway, the older, larger guy says, "Just because I don't like rap music doesn't make me racist, man. Jesus, I mean, I'm the world's biggest Eddie Murphy fan. Wearing a pillowcase over my head and carrying a burning cross and shit, now that's racist. All I'm doing is expressing my own personal opinion regarding popular music tastes." And then the younger guy asks, "What about the soul? You don't like soul music either, Jaffa. And Michael Jackson, what about him, huh? Don't you think there's something of a pattern emerging here?" And Jaffa gets very offended by that accusation, and he yells, "Suck me! You keep that shit up, and I swear, you're gonna end up on a slab in here next to this poor bitch." And the younger guy doesn't seem offended by this. He just kind of smiles and says, "Interesting choice of words. Very misogynistic." So it seems like he's just trying to get a rise out of his buddy Jaffa here. But finally, they reach the room where they're going to do the autopsy, and as they position the table in it, Jaffa says, "Shut up and get off my case, Paul. In fact, don't even talk to me. The pathologist will be here in 2 minutes, and we still haven't even cleaned this one up." And Paul replies, "I don't even know why they're bothering to cut her open. Doesn't look like there's anything left inside to me." Then they both stare down at Anna, and Jaffa says, "Now why do you suppose a beautiful young girl like this drinks a bottle of paint stripper and swallows half her medicine cabinet, huh?" And Paul answers, "I don't know. Too much Oprah? Well, wherever she is right now, I hope she's happy." And then we get a panel of Anna's dead face, and it does not look happy. In fact, it looks very nervous or worried, like her brow is furrowed and her mouth is in a frown. Then we turn the page and we cut to Swamp Thing, and he is sitting on a rock that is jutting out of the ocean, and there are waves splashing all around him, and he's looking down at the water. And we see the name of this issue is The Parliament of Waves. And underneath the title of this issue, there are the credits for the comic, and interestingly, all the names are spelled and written backwards. Not sure why that is. It doesn't really have anything to do with the comic itself that I can think of, but I wanted to mention it because it's really weird, and at first I thought a couple different people wrote and drew this issue because of it. And it's obviously not like a misprint or something, because the way that it's spelled out, Miller is reversed and the R is capitalized, so it looks like the name of the writer for this issue is Ralem Cram, which of course is just Mark Miller backwards and the first and last name switched around. So once again, I don't know why they did this, but it was just interesting and it threw me off for a second. So anyway, back to Swamp Thing. So as the waves crash on this rock that Swamp Thing's sitting on, his narration says, "This is the final chapter. 1,000 miles from the coast of Japan, in the heart of the Philippine Sea. This is where everything ends. I had hoped Anna's secret would be revealed at the source of the Mississippi, but instead, I was led here, to the spiritual source of all rivers. 8 miles below, deep inside the Marianas Trench, the Parliament of Waves are waiting. I must seek an audience with this ancient force and ask them to lay Anna's troubled soul to rest. It was written at the end of her book that only they have the power to do so. Down here, at the bottom of the world, our destinies will, at last, converge." Then we see Swamp Thing stand up, and we see that there are stairs carved into one of the faces of this rock that's jutting out of the water, and Swamp Thing begins to walk down them, continuing even as his head goes under the water. And as we turn the page, we see him walking down these steps, and it's kind of interesting because at the top of the water, it was splashing a lot, and it was very tumultuous, but underneath here, as Swamp Thing continues to go down these steps that apparently go all the way down to the bottom, it's very calm, and Swamp Thing's just watching schools of fish swim by, and his narration says, 30 meters down, I'm welcomed by expectant triggerfish, feeding on my body's floral buffet. The sensation is not unpleasant, and I allow them to stay. Half a mile away, a male humpback whale blows a warning stream of bubbles, alerting a nearby female and her calf to my presence. Above me, a shoal of bat ray eclipse the moonlight, swimming east to mate in shallow summer waters. Lost in a blizzard of fins and air bubbles, the warm water swallows me whole and carries me down to the belly of the planet, deeper and deeper into the submarine black, down to the Parliament of Waves. And as Swamp Thing's walking, he's thinking about all the different stories in Anna's books, and we get a page of little flashes of scenes from each of them, and Swamp Thing's narration continues. My journey to this place was not what I had expected. The original reason behind this quest was to free the soul of a dead writer from the pages of her unfinished book, but sometimes it seemed her stories had more relevance to me than they ever could to her. How could Anna know so many facts about the details of my past? So many questions are left unanswered. Could it be that this was the purpose all along? Did the Parliament of Waves use Anna to bring me to them, leading me through a series of trials? If that is correct, then what have I learned from these experiences? What has the water taught me? Purification, perhaps. After all, lies and deceptions were the source of the problems in Anna's book, but I fear this is not the answer. Fluidity is the lesson we must learn from the water. The ability to change the future holds an infinite number of possibilities, and humanity must adapt to face this new world or become extinct. It's as simple as that. Then we turn the page, and I guess the steps eventually do just stop in the middle of the water before they reach the bottom of the Marianas Trench, because we see Swamp Thing just sinking down now, and as he does that, he sees an American World War II Navy ship, and it's kind of resting precariously on the edge of a cliff that I'm assuming goes down into the Marianas Trench. And on the ground scattered around it, we can see lots of human bones and, I guess, trash left over from the war. And as Swamp Thing sees all this, his narration continues, saying, "Resting on a sunken mountain, man's single contribution sits uneasily with nature's wonders. And yet, in truth, there is a certain beauty to this punctured wreck, a quiet dignity restored by time. Perhaps half a century has washed away the sick debris of war and left lost souls picked clean of hate to rest forever in eternal peace. 1 mile down, the triggerfish detach themselves, one by one, and drift away apparently disturbed. The image freezes, and I'm Alec Holland, all alone, sinking to the bottom of the ocean. And I wonder, will I ever make it back?" So as he goes down into this trench, all the light fades out until he's just floating in darkness. And his narration continues saying, "How long have I been falling? Minutes? Maybe years. It's impossible to say. Time and space no longer have any meaning. Here, the surface feels as distant as the moon, and yet they drag me deeper still. Abruptly, I hit the lowest point on Earth, 8 miles down from sight or sound, in the region where the blind fish swim." So as Swamp Thing hits the bottom, he tries to stand up, but it looks like he's struggling very much. His narration says, "The pressure is indescribable, like the weight of the world is sitting on my shoulders. But I can't give up now. I have to keep going until I reach the Parliament of Waves. I can't let Anna down." Then from behind Swamp Thing, as he's struggling, we hear a voice say, "Hello, Alec. What kept you? I've been waiting down here for ages." And as Swamp Thing turns around to see who it is, he sees Anna standing there, and he yells out, "Anna!" And she just kind of casually walks up and says, "This place is the gateway to the Parliament of Waves, Alec. If you can survive the water pressure down here, I'll be home and dry. Screw up, and well, let's just say I'm up shit creek without a paddle." And the whole time she's talking, Swamp Thing is trying to stand, but the pressure is really taking its toll, and he's pushing with all his might as he says, "I will not let you down. I promise." And Anna says, "That's it. Now take it nice and slow. One leg in front of the other. You remember." And with that, Swamp Thing is able to barely stand on his own 2 feet, and he restates to Anna, "I will not let you down." And with that, he takes 1 step forward, and Anna says, "I know you won't. Now, come on, 1 more step." Then as Swamp Thing takes the 2nd step, his legs give out, and he falls down to the ocean floor, and he yells out in pain. And Anna again tries to encourage him, saying, "Hold on now, Alec. Keep yourself together. Get back up and try again. Don't let the pressure get to you." But it seems like it's too late, because as Swamp Thing struggles, one of his eyes pops out of his head, and then his body begins to just kind of dissolve. And as this happens, Anna goes over to where Swamp Thing's body was, and she very sadly kneels down and kind of watches as the current takes the little pieces of Swamp Thing's body that were left over. And then a voice says,
"The Earth Elemental has failed to reach the Parliament of Waves, and so your curse continues until another rises in his place. An event which we believe may take more than 1,000,000 years."
And when Anna hears this, she looks very sad and she says, "Shit." And then she stands up to walk back into the darkness of the water. And behind her, we do see something beginning to form in the general area where Swamp Thing was. And the voice continues over her walking.
"The failure of the Holland mine was expected. He was too human in his ways, and so we must begin afresh. The Parliament of Trees must now select another candidate."
And then whatever's talking realizes that there is something forming behind Anna, and with some excitement it says, "Wait! Something stirs among the silicon spores. A chlorophyll strip within the diatomaceous sand is forming a figure of root and rock. Ah!" And then Anna turns around to see what the voice is talking about, and she sees Swamp Thing growing a new body, but this body looks a bit different. It's still got plants, but the rocks that are incorporated into its body are more like fossils or coral. And as Swamp Thing's body fully forms, she says, "Jesus, Alec, nice outfit." And then we get like half a splash page of Swamp Thing's new body, and it is looking pretty badass. He looks kind of like a mix between King Triton, Aquaman, and the bad guy from Pirates of the Caribbean 2. I don't remember what his name is, but the guy with the octopus beard. And Swamp Thing looks down at Anna with his new body and he says, "Thank you. Now take me to the Parliament of Waves. Let us see if they can remedy your situation." And Anna smiles up at him and says, "This is incredible. Your new body looks like armor. What's it made of? Shells and stuff?" And Swamp Thing replies, "The minerals I utilized were designed by nature to withstand the rigors of these depths. The pressure down here should no longer be an obstacle." And a very excited Anna says, "Brilliant. That means we can go see the Parliament of Waves. You can tell them to lift this damn curse I've been stuck with." And then Swamp Thing says to her, "Anna, wait a moment. If your spirit is down here with me, then why don't you plead your own case? Why do you need my help?" And Anna looks kind of annoyed at this question, and she says, "Never mind that. They'll explain everything in a minute." And then she motions towards something ahead of them that's off panel, and she says, "Look at them, Alec. Don't they make your head feel funny?" And then we get a double-page spread of the Parliament of Waves in their full splendor, and they're kind of hard to describe because, like, with the Parliament of Stone, you got like pillars of big stones that were the Parliament, and with the Parliament of Trees, you have big trees, obviously. So with this, it's kind of like, how do you represent water, and especially when they're underneath the water? So what the artist has done here is kind of clever. There are these things that kind of look like pottery vessels, and out of them are squirting geysers of a different type of water that looks different, and you can actually see it under the ocean. It's kind of like when you see videos of the deep ocean, and there are those heated vents that are spewing hot water into the cold ocean, so you can actually see where the hot water is coming out, and it looks different than the ocean water. And as the water sprays up, it arcs and then falls down on either side. And just below the tops of each of these arcs on each side, there's like green glowing lights. So they kind of look like eyeballs, with the arcs acting like eyebrows. But there's no mouth or anything, just like the Parliament of Trees and Stone. And Swamp Thing is looking at them with amazement, and Anna says, "The Parliament of Waves. Impressive or what?" And as Swamp Thing looks on with awe, he says, "I have visited every corner of the earth, walked upon worlds so perfect and far away, I could barely contain my tears. But never in all my life have I seen anything like this. You're so beautiful. I hardly know what to say." And Anna, under her breath, jokingly says, "Brown noser." But Swamp Thing doesn't take notice of this, and he continues addressing the Parliament of Waves, saying, "This woman asked me to come here. Her spirit has been imprisoned in your domain, and she wants you to review her case and set her free." And then the Parliament replies,
"You are mistaken, Holland Mind."
And a confused Swamp Thing asks, "I do not understand. What do you mean?" And the Parliament answers,
"The being beside you is a stillborn wave elemental, neither human nor the other. She brought you here so that you might take her place and let her rest in peace."
And then Swamp Thing looks over to Anna questioningly, and she looks down kind of ashamed and says, "Shit happens, Alec. To be perfectly honest, I only just discovered the truth myself. I'm sorry." And then the Parliament of Waves explains to Swamp Thing,
"The droplet did not seek to deceive you, Holland Mind. She thought she was human, just as you once believed you were a man. Even her memory of the day at the beach was a remnant of her human consciousness. Picture her, standing there transfixed by the glistening waves. There was no doubt she was the one we had been waiting for."
And under this explanation, we are getting some flashback panels of Anna and her sister when Anna was younger, and we see her at the beach, and then we see her wading through the water, and I guess that's when the Parliament realized that she was going to be a future elemental. Then we get some panels of Anna when she's older, writing her book on her computer and talking to her boyfriend, and then one of Anna after she was dead on the ground with all of the poison that she drank surrounding her on the ground. And the Parliament's explanation continues.
We supplied the first drops of inspiration for her stories, providing bits of information about the elemental community. We watched her build a successful life, then washed it all away. Every ritual demands a sacrifice, and so we drove Anna to suicide. Our mistake, however, was the timing of the event. We should have waited until the last page of the book had been completed. Anna's spirit was not at peace with itself, and so her reflection was bound to the Mississippi River as a wandering ghost.
And then a very perturbed Anna says to Swamp Thing, "They wanted me to become a water elemental. Can you believe it? I spent my whole life avoiding any kind of responsibility, and then they asked me to be the champion of the Parliament of Waves. Christ, I can't even swim." And then she gets a little bit more serious and looks at Swamp Thing and says, "You've already done so much, but would you do this for me? Would you take my place instead? You're good at this kind of thing. Please?" And as Swamp Thing thinks about this, the Parliament of Waves says,
"Consider your words carefully, Holland Mind. This is a decision which should not be taken lightly. Heavy responsibility will follow."
And then Anna walks over to Swamp Thing and puts her hands on his chest, and she says, "Please, Alec, I don't want any of this." And then Swamp Thing leans down and kisses her forehead and says, "Goodbye, Anna. Rest in peace." And then Anna looks down at her body, which begins to kind of just dissolve away in the water. And at first she's confused, but then she starts smiling. But Swamp Thing sees this and he says, "Anna, what's happening?" And with a smile on her face, Anna replies, "It's okay. I'm fine. I don't know how much longer I can keep it together, but I just want to say thanks. Thanks for helping me finish that stupid book of mine. I never have done it without you. Oh God, sis. Is that you, sis? Oh Jesus. It's so good to. And then she disappears completely as her spirit finally moves on. And then a very somber Swamp Thing asks the Parliament, "Where has she gone?" And the Parliament answers,
"To heaven, or what she believes to be heaven. Our stillborn elemental has been dissolved and her immortal soul is finally at rest."
And then Swamp Thing asks, "And what about me? What have I now become?" And the Parliament answers,
"When you joined the Parliament of Trees and Stones in spiritual communion, you became the one true elemental of Earth, the god of rocks and trees and grass and mountains. Now the water is yours to command as well. A gesture of your hand may bring a flood or a drought. A wrinkle of your brow could mean a thunderstorm. Every raindrop now bows down before you, Holland Mind. Only two elements do not yet do your bidding."
And Swamp Thing says, "The earth and the water of this world are now mine to control. Do you mean other parliaments exist which represent air and fire?" And the Parliament replies,
"The Parliament of Vapors and the Parliament of Flames. Forget not what you learned from the water, and you will reach them in due course. We many were once as one, and the world was governed by a single intelligence. You have succeeded in fusing the earth and the water once again, and soon, we hope, the others will follow. Awaiting you is a great destiny, Holland Mind. Power over all will be yours, and a new golden age will dawn upon this world."
And Swamp Thing asks, "You mean that I am destined to teach sanity to the people of the earth? Will humankind learn to live in harmony with nature once again?" And the Parliament of Waves replies,
"Humankind? Humankind has no place in our plans."
Then we turn the page and we cut to Louisiana, and we see a boy standing in front of a big tree. And you probably forgot, but if you remember when all the Cajuns were killed by Swamp Thing at the beginning of this run, one of the spirits of the Cajuns ended up inhabiting a tree in the swamps. So this boy that's standing in front of the tree is actually talking to it, and he says, "I got a big surprise tonight, Papa. Aunt Janine packed a special supper for you because I told her how sad you looked last time I was here." And the tree replies,
What is it, Jules? What did she make me? Is it pork?
And Jules replies, "No, silly Papa. Can't you smell the boiling fruit? It's her special homemade blackberry jam. Would you like to lick it from my fingers?" And then it seems like the tree senses something bad. And by that, I mean the tree actually has a face and its teeth are like pointy and sharp and stuff. So it doesn't look very nice, but apparently it's not evil or anything. It just looks like that. And it seems to be filled with dread at whatever it's sensing because it says,
Jules.
but Jules doesn't sense whatever his father's feeling. So he says, "What's wrong, Papa? Aren't you hungry?" But then he hears a noise and he looks behind him and he sees a sprout grow out of the ground quickly. And he says questioningly, "Papa?" And the tree yells,
Jules, get out of here, boy, before it's too late. Bon Gumbo's growing a new body for himself. He's coming home.
And sure enough, that is what's happening. So as Swamp Thing finishes his new body, the tree father says to the son,
Quiet. Don't make a sound. Step back into the trees before he sees you.
And Jules asks, "But what about you?" And the father replies,
I'll be safe enough here. He can't hurt me anymore.
And then Swamp Thing looks at them and says,
I can hear talking. Who's out there?
And then from behind the tree, Jules says, "It's only me, Jules, with a big pot of jam. Nobody special." And Swamp Thing commands,
Show yourself.
So Jules steps out from behind the tree and he says, "Okay, Bon Gumbo, just don't shoot a tree at my ass like you did to my paw, eh?" And then Swamp Thing begins to walk towards him, and Jules takes off running, and Swamp Thing says,
Please, don't be afraid. I promise I won't hurt you. I am not the creature who murdered your people. I have always been your friend.
But Jules doesn't really listen to him. He just keeps running, and he says, "No, get back. You're not our old friend. My papa told me what you're going to do to the world. He said you're a bad spirit now, Bon Gumbo. My papa told me you're going to kill everything." And as the boy runs off into the distance, Swamp Thing yells,
Wait, come back here. I need to talk to you, please. What do you mean?
And then Swamp Thing is left standing there, looking pretty sad, alone in the swamp. Then we cut back to the morgue where the autopsy of Anna has just taken place. And there's 3 people here. I'm assuming one of them is a doctor, and then there's 2 helpers. And one of the helpers is a woman. And the doctor says to her, "Okay, I guess that wraps things up for tonight. Stomach contents checked out with all the empty bottles they found on her kitchen floor. No sign of any external interference. Straightforward suicide." And then the female helper notices that the faucet is on, and she walks over to it and she says, "Someone left the faucet running. That's one of my pet peeves. My husband does it all the time." And then she reaches out and turns it off and says, "There, that's better." And I'm assuming this was in here because maybe that's how the Parliament of Waves was keeping an eye on Anna. But now that they don't need her anymore, the water's been turned off. Then we see the doctor and the male assistant turn Anna's body onto its back. And as the assistant sees her face, he says, "Shit, what a mess she's made of herself. She must have swallowed at least half a dozen brands of cleaning fluid. Her insides were like minestrone soup." And the doctor replies, "I reckon it's safe to say this was one unhappy woman. Did you know she used to be a writer?" And I guess the doctor is saying this not just to the male assistant, but also to the female assistant, because the male assistant looks up at her and says, "Not a real writer. She just wrote comic books." And then the doctor notices something about Anna's face as he looks at her, and he says, "Hey, would you look at that? The muscles in her cheeks must have shrunk in the cold air. Weird. It almost looks like she's smiling." And then we get a panel of Anna's body, and she is in fact smiling because now she is finally at rest. And that, my friends, is the end of the issue. So if you guys have any comments, questions, or suggestions, you can email me at planestrains and comic books, all one word, at gmail.com. And remember, until next time, stay swampy.